Good afternoon. My name is Kerry, Billingsley, Director of Student Services for Irwin County Schools. As promised, we told you we would have a video and release protocols once we got the feedback from public health. We've gotten that feedback and just want to share some things and kind of put it in perspective for you when students come back to school, what you can expect. This applies for students and staff if they have been exposed to someone with COVID or have suspected exposure to COVID and are showing symptoms. These are the following things that we would do. Before that, I want to let you know what some of those symptoms are and also kind of what that temperature is that we're looking at that could cause a student not to be able to get on the bus, as we talked about in the last video, or be able to enter the school, or you be contacted if a student is running a fever at school. 100.4 or higher will be the number that we're looking at when it comes to a fever. So even if it wasn't COVID, that's the number. They're running a fever. We're going to need you to come get them. If they have that 100.4 or greater number in the parking lot, at the bus stop, they will not be allowed to get on the bus or to come to school. Some of the other symptoms that we'll be looking at is a cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headaches, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion, or runny nose, nausea, or vomiting, or diarrhea. Now, obviously, could it be cases of that? A student has bad allergies? Yes. Could it be a case where they just have a stomach bug? Yes. But in these times, we cannot take a chance. So if any of those symptoms come up, it is more than likely that we're going to ask that you come get them, particularly if it is accompanied by a fever. But a fever does not have to be present for you to be asked to leave or come pick your child up. For a staff member that is displaying any of those symptoms, we're going to allow them to leave immediately. If it's a student, we're going to isolate that student and then contact you and ask you to please come pick up your child. Also, if that be the case, for anybody that is displaying those symptoms, we're also you're going to, and this is the recommendation from public health, you're going to have to isolate for 10 days. Upon that, those 10 days, after 10 days, you also have to have 3 days or 72 hours of fever-free with no help from medication in order for them to return to school. Excuse me. Also, their symptoms do have to be improving. Now, what does that mean? If you still have the cough or a little bit of the shortness of breath or fatigue, as long as you've had the 10 days and the 3 days of no fever, then you will be allowed to return to school. For those who may be asymptomatic, meaning that they do not have any symptoms, the recommendation for those, if for some reason a staff member or a student has been exposed to someone in their home, and then they're tested, but they had no symptoms, they still will have to isolate for 10 days or have a positive, a negative lab result. If a student with a known exposure to someone with COVID, but still is not showing any symptoms, that particular person will have to be quarantined for 14 days and monitor their symptoms during that time. So it is possible that a student could be out of school with no symptoms if they've been exposed to someone with COVID for 14 days. Okay. Now, what I do want to clear up, and one of the things that could help us all to avoid a student or a staff member from losing time at school when they are not displaying any symptoms or have not been, had a positive test, in a classroom, if we have a known case that we have a student who is symptomatic and they are showing some of the symptoms that I detailed earlier in the video, then that particular student who has the symptoms must be sent home, and they have the 10 days or the protocol for how long they need to be out. But then everyone else that is in the classroom, the first question that's going to be asked, what students were in class or next to that, in the class with that student that did not have PPE on. So if a student does not have a mask on, shield, or some other type of facial covering, they then will actually have to go home and self-isolate for 14 days because they were exposed to someone who had symptoms or could also have later tested positive for COVID. So the way to ensure that your child is in school and not losing any instructional time is to make sure that they're wearing masks. So those students who are in that class that had a mask on or facial covering, they will not, and staff member, they will not be required to self-isolate. So in order to avoid losing instructional time or creating a hardship on parents who cannot afford to stay home with their child, a face covering is necessary. So with that said, once we have that situation, if we have a student who was symptomatic, regardless of whether or not they tested positive or not, or staff member, everyone from that classroom will be removed. Those that did not have a face covering on, they will be asked to go home. Those that had face coverings, we will then move them to another class. We will not clean that class for a recommended time of at least 24 hours. And so we will then, those students who remain at school or can come back the next day, they will meet in a different classroom. Therefore, we're allowing that class to be clean, and it will be up to about 48 hours or 2 days before we'll take the class back into a classroom that this occurred. Now, the issue for us is this could affect multiple classrooms in a day, particularly at the upper elementary, middle, and high, because of so many students changing classes. So when a student changes class, we find out, we have to go back, and recommendation from public health is to try to look back 2 days as to who was exposed to this student. So it is imperative, I beg you to please have your children wear some type of face covering. Again, if those students who, as I said in the earlier video, if they have asthma or respiratory issues, we will provide a face shield for them. So that should help some, but it is imperative that we can keep everybody safe. We can eliminate losing important instructional time that we've already lost over the last few months if we would just have our students and staff wear some type of face covering. Later today, we will release this information on our social media sites. I have one form. There will be a flyer that you'll see that's based off of the recommendations from public health, and then there'll be a short protocol for a known exposure that you can go back and see in writing what I just talked about. So again, thank you for the opportunity. My prayers are that we all stay safe, and please take this seriously and help. We know that elementary school kids is going to be a work in progress, from teachers as well as parents, in helping our children understand the importance of wearing the face covering. But it is that important because you can lose costly time, instructional time, by just not having a face covering and someone else was sick. So Again, thank you and have a great day. God bless.